welcome to another edition of Hats Off, Unmasking Toxic Masculinity. I'm your host, James McKnight. We're continuing to celebrate Women's History Month by featuring women as our guests this month, even though we will still be talking about men's mental health issues. We want to hear from the female perspective and experts. As such, I'm pleased to introduce today's guest, Linda Gonzalez. She joins us from California. Welcome. Linda, it's so good to see you.
It's good to see you, and I'm excited about our conversation.
Awesome. So I want to just tell people a little bit about you. Linda is a bilingual life coach, business employee, consultant, and writer with a focus on liberation practices and racial justice and the systemic change through collaborative, interactive processes. She addresses dynamics of power, intersectionality, and different work approaches. As a writer, she explores issues around gender identity, cultural hybridity, motherhood, and marriage. Her work examines the tension in embracing feminism as a life philosophy. Her latest book, Rest Like a Giant Tree, I love that title. I can just see that big tree, is timely and affirming, focusing on the importance of staying in the present moment and crucial to the life of meaning and happiness amid mass deportations, genocide, and the vicarious trauma. Her previous book included the memoirs, The Cost of Our Lives and Mothering as a Legacy. Linda, what part of California are you living in?
I'm currently living in a town called Point Richmond, which everybody in Northern California seems to know about. It is on the east side of the bay, so I am perfectly situated to explore all the wonders of Northern California and the San Francisco Bay.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. I love California, and I certainly will be out there shortly. I have a friend who lives in LA. Just wanted to just mention something here. Which came first for you professionally? You work as a coach and consultant, or a writer, author, or did one inform the other?
That's a great question. I think that's part of the intersectionality of our lives,
I
where
see.
often, the dominant culture tells us it's this or that and that, And so for me, it's always been all of those in many ways. Obviously, as a child, probably in my preteens, I began to write. And I was always the person that people came to talk through things. So, in some level, I've been coaching even before it was a profession. And I think probably consulting came a little bit later. And as I said, I think all of those were always part of my life, even when I was younger and didn't have those words.
Sure. Let's get at least one definition out of the way. In your introduction, I mentioned that your work has focused on liberation practices, libertarian practices. What is that exactly?
I think it depends on the situation and people. One of the powers of the white supremacy culture is the idea there's one right way to do things. And so even in the idea of what is liberating for you and for me,
Mm-hmm.
for men, women,
Mm-hmm.
different gender identities and races, I think that it depends on the person. For me, it is about how are you most who you are, your essential nature.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that you can give the gifts that are uniquely yours and to feel joy and power in doing that?
And I love that idea, of course. And we are going through a difficult time in this country. And I think that some of us are caught by fear, Linda. um, we see so many things that are happening, people getting picked up. It's tremendous. So I respect and love your practice, but I think that people are fearful. And so we need to decide on how we, I guess, collectively can kind of work through some of that. Any thoughts on that?
I think fear is real and that fear is a message. One of the most powerful models and tools that I learned and that I train and offer to other people is the idea that feelings are messengers.
Hmm.
Again, the dominant culture tells us there's good feelings and bad feelings, and I reject that. I think every feeling tells you something. And I think, particularly as people of color, and certainly as a woman of color, fear will save my life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yes.
So
So in
there's,
your, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No,
Go
you go
ahead.
ahead. Finish, please.
Yeah, so I think that when we experience fear, it means that there is perceived a real danger. And I imagine you in the work that you do
Sure.
have to differentiate that and support people to differentiate that, right? There
Certainly.
is the perceived fear that may have come from historic trauma
Hmm.
and that we carry in our bodies, and that when we are triggered by something that reminds us of that, we feel fear. And so we have to understand and heal from the fear that is no longer there,
Hmm.
and then to trust when we feel fear that tells us to protect ourselves, and then to look for support.
Right. So in your consulting, and of course you have you have skill sets. Do you find that you use any particular skill sets per se, or and then you use those skill sets to, I'm sure, to help men of color? So what would you say to that? And what demographics do you typically work with?
Yes, I mean, predominantly people of color.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sure. And obviously, men and women, either cisgendered or trans, right? So, it's complicated.
Yes, yes,
It,
yes.
it really depends on, the more I always say racial equity work or equity work in general,
Hmm.
liberation work
Yes,
is always a learning edge because we are always being exposed to new ideas and new ways of understanding who we are and who other people are. And that
certainly.
so it's really a rich practice because it doesn't ever end. And you have to be curious and have a learning mode for all of that. In terms of the skills, I do really focus on feelings because I do think that all of us are generally feeling illiterate, that we
Hmm.
cannot, when I ask people, how are you feeling? They give me a thought. And that's part of the dominant culture as well, which is thinking is better than feeling. And so often, what I want to work with people on is to develop their capacity to understand what they're feeling. They're usually very good at thinking because that's what's been rewarded since they were young children.
Sure.
And so there's an imbalance. And so for me, it's to bring them both into balance so you can work with both of them to know what you're feeling and then also what you're thinking, and then bring those together to be able to act in a way that is honest and authentic to you.
And of course, it's great that you're working with men, but we men, we have our issues too, and that's kind of why we start the podcast. And we talk
Yeah,
sometimes about the mask of masculinity or toxic masculinity, even though there's a debate whether it's toxic or not. But in your
right.
equity work and working with men, individuals, organizations, what do you see? What kind of masks do you see that men often will
In
project?
many ways, yes. In terms of equity work, what I often see is the white adjacent mask, right?
Mm, mm,
Because to survive, men of color have to put on a white mask, if you will, to be acceptable, to be valued, to not be hurt, right? And it's a right, it's a two-edged sword, as they say. On the one hand, that may get you somewhere, and on the other hand, you lose so much in terms of what you have to give to the world. And so I think it's a complicated, it's code switching is the way I look at it, right? And so part of it is you have to wear a mask at times to survive and to be successful in the world that we live in. And yet at the same time, there has to be some practice of healing from having to do that. That I think a lot of men of color aren't aware of, that they are either wearing the mask. I think they're often aware that they're wearing the mask, and I'm obviously talking about men who are in the capitalist system, right?
hmm,
Who
hmm,
are-
hmm.
and and I don't think they're as aware of the cost and the practices that they need to heal themselves.
Sometimes we see that men, we can be somewhat condescending to women. And, we've grown up in this patriarchal kind of system. But how do you feel that this impacts men and their mental health when it comes to
Deeply.
women in their lives?
Yes, when I do equity work, one of the things that we do is we ask people to identify themselves in the areas where they have historical and current privilege, and then the areas where they have historical and current, where they're deprived of privilege. And then we talk about that in some ways that's a dance. If you are experiencing deprivation of privilege, so say men of color are deprived of privilege because of the racial ethnic background, then you look for a place where you can have power.
Hmm.
And the way that society gives you power is they give you power as a male, they give you power as an adult, and so then the impact of that is sometimes when you are with women and children is to exert yourself because society has told you this is where you have power.
Yes, yes. How can men become more self-aware, would you say, on these issues?
I mean, I think obviously some of the work that you do,
Hmm. Hmm. Certainly.
and I'd love to hear from you, like how you work with men of color to become more aware, and then I can add something to that.
Well, you're exactly right. I think that we have to kind of break down some of the stereotypes, of course, and the misperceptions and the misconceptions around mental health, because we often, and particularly in our communities, see mental health as a weakness or needing mental health or needing help around the mental health area is a weakness. But I think that through education, certainly, through modeling, I love it that some friends have started different programs where they have fathers and sons come in so that they can see that we as men, we do have feelings and we do want to express those feelings. And we do want to have periods where we may have to break down if we lost a mother or a loved one, things like that. So it's a lot of through education, of course, and modeling, um, encouraging, and people who write wonderful books like yourself, encourage them to read books. There's a lot of education there. So certainly, um, we try to use those to address a lot of those issues.
Yeah, I think that's right. That everybody has to sit and think about where is their access with ease.
Yes.
Right? Again, breaking through that one right way paradigm to say, well, this is how you do it, or this is how you do it. And to give people permission that they get to think about and have agency over what works for them.
Yes.
I think that that is part of that empowering process that people are have lost and have lost their capacity to trust their inner wisdom. And so
Mhm.
if I think about what I do, it is very much about encouraging people to listen to themselves, to listen to that voice that often has been suppressed. It's interesting when we were doing this, I went as a writer, I love to do research. And so I looked up the definition of toxic masculinity to sort of see what I think about, like what came
Yes.
up, right?
Yes. Hmm.
And so it
Yes.
talked about emotional suppression, aggression, and the rejection of femininity. And I thought, oh, one of the reasons I have always loved sports as a young girl, my father was he was an immigrant Mexican and he loved the US sports. And he also just was very inviting of me and my sister and my brother to watch sports with him. And I became very engaged with sports. And years later, it's actually the first chapter, the first essay of the Rest Like a Giant Tree book. I talk about, it's called Fouling is Part of the Game. And one of the things that helped me because I was pretty outspoken and competitive in an era where that was not acceptable for women, for sure, not women of color. And I loved watching the men tackling, pulling, elbowing, and shoving because it made me feel okay about my own competitiveness. And given
Hmm.
that
Yes.
definition of toxic masculinity, I was saying, oh, I was having definitely doing some emotional suppression, aggression, and rejecting the definition of femininity that was given to me. And so I found that sports was a great way to release aggression, and often it was misguided. I'm not going to lie. I used to play soccer on and off for 30 years, and
Yes.
I would get yellow cards. I'm not, yeah. And then one of the things I became aware of is that most of the men I was watching play sports were black and brown.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
thought, yeah, that way to be able to take that aggression, which on the healthy side is assertiveness, right?
Sure.
And power and ex and show it in a way where people were positive about it, paid you, and gave you some sense of power in the world. And I just had to understand for myself how much my work challenges were coming out in my sports playing.
I see.
You see what I mean? Like there was
Yes.
I couldn't be angry, right? I couldn't fight back in many of my work situations. And when I got on that soccer field, that was where I could let it all out. And I had to
Nice.
learn, and it took me years, let me just say,
Hmm.
to learn how to be appropriately competitive.
Right. Right. So, which is a great example of how, particularly men in sports, need to know how to garnish and kind of pull back some of that toxicity or that intensity on a field playing sports. But when you come home, there's another side of that you need to show, most definitely.
Right. And often we get, and I still watch a lot of sports. Tennis is now my primary game that I play and watch. And but I also love basketball, football,
Um,
love soccer.
I'm
And
also married to a woman who loves every sport there is too. So I'm very lucky. Us,
well,
everyone
we
just
get to know
exactly
each
like
other.
you. She
Oh,
loves them.
I'm not into hockey. I just want to
Uh
say
huh.
not hockey. Uh, although I did watch a little bit of the women's hockey at the
Yes, we
Olympics
did too.
because it was the very first black woman who was getting a medal. So I thought
Yes,
that was,
yes, yes.
still making history 500 years later, right? Still
Hmm.
like so many firsts that
Yes,
are still there,
exactly.
which is
Exactly.
wonderful and terrible at the
Sure,
same time.
sure. I wanted to
So go ahead.
hit just this question here. It's kind of a heavy question, but I think that we need to certainly look at it. Can you talk specifically about Latin men in America within our current political and social atmosphere? It's well documented that the Latin men in the last three elections voted overwhelmingly for Trump. And it
Yes.
was a little bit surprised, to be quite honest with you, if not angered, a lot of Democrats, especially Black and other brown communities. Why do you think they voted the way they did in support of Trump, particularly with his
Yeah.
immigration policies and other issues?
I mean, I think that ties back to that issue I talked about where you don't have power, then you
Hmm.
look to align yourself with
Yes.
somebody that has power. And there is a way where they wanted that idea of a strong man. And, a lot of Latin American countries, quite frankly, have had dictators and authoritarian leaders that were put in place by the U.S. Let's be clear that it all, like as we say, we're here because you were there, right? There's when you talk about immigration,
Yes.
people don't want to leave their countries. 90% of them, they want to live in peace. They want to be able to work and raise their families and speak the language. Well, of course, Spanish is also a colonized language, but the language of that particular country. And so they come here because the U.S. has gone there and often put in a dictator or authoritarian in power because that suits the U.S. So it's tricky, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
In a way, we have been colonized to believe that the strong man, so to speak, will make everything okay by the U.S. And then people get angry about that we believe that story. I also think that my parents, for example, immigrants, pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, were able to overcome a lot of challenges. They were lifelong Republicans. We just, and in the end, the three children were Democrats
Hmm. Hmm.
I've
Hmm.
been an independent now for a long time, but I was a Democrat for many, many years. And we laughed and said, well, within our nuclear family of five, we got one vote. right? And for them, they felt like Republicans, they were conservative. Like we aren't liberal or conservative based on our race or our gender.
Exactly.
We look for what message rings true for us.
I agree.
And so for a lot of these Latino men, they felt they were often either first or second generation,
Hmm.
and they wanted to align themselves with the normative and with someone who was saying that we could be great, and then also exhibiting, obviously some the very negative parts of toxic
Hmm.
masculinity, shall we
Hmm.
say.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm. Hmm.
they had felt, and I honestly I feel the same way. The Democratic Party not has failed many people in this country, and so they thought, well, we're going to look for something different. There's a woman, Paola Ramos, who wrote a great book called The Defectors, and she goes deep into interviewing, Latino skinheads, and,
Yes.
just going deep into these men's lives to
Hmm.
understand what they did and why they did it. It's a wonderful book, and she is a queer Latina woman. It
Hmm.
was it was a little scary for her to go into communities and talk to people who were not, if they knew who she really was, would not be very approving. But she felt the need to honestly listen to them and to
Yes.
see them as human beings and to get past the stereotypes, like you said earlier.
Yes, exactly. Great. Well, I want to go back to that book of yours, Rest Like a Giant Tree. In fact, can you explain the title a little bit? 'Cause I mean, because that's the way it impacted me when you said a giant tree. I just saw a big tree just sitting there. But you can explain it a little bit. What's
Yes. Well, it comes from a quote
Mm-hmm.
by Buddha.
All right.
Yeah, I've had a deep spiritual practice with Buddhism for a long time.
I see.
And it's a quote that has gotten me through many difficult times to
Mm-hmm.
remember, and it goes, praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and sorrow come and go like the wind. To
Mm,
be happy, rest like a giant tree in the midst of them all.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm going to adopt that. Please.
Yes, because it's the way of the world, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
praise and we get so excited, and there's blame and we get sad. We gain something and we're thrilled, and we lose something and we're depressed. Pleasure, we dig into it, right? But sorrow then comes, right? So it's this idea. I often like to, you think about when the breeze comes, right? And it moves the tree, and yet the tree just rests. It is not, it just takes whatever happens,
Mm,
and it doesn't get overly excited and it doesn't get overly sad, right? And so that's this idea of how are we happy in the midst of what's going on all during these days, James? Like how do we see all the difficult news and still
exactly.
remember that we need joy? Like that joy is the antidote.
Yes. Yes, we have to have that also. So, perfect title. Wonderful. And how can we get your book? Where can we get copies?
Well, I have a website that has all my books and information about my coaching, and it's just my first and last name, so
Mm-hmm.
all lowercase,
All right.
Linda, Linda, Gonzalez, Gonzalez.net, although
Mm-hmm.
com will take you there too. And so that's where you can read more about what I do. And I really do believe that my writing is part of my healing practice, both for
Yes.
myself, right? Because we have to, as you know, we have to keep healing ourselves,
We have
and
to.
also to encourage other people that you can be happy, you can have joy in the midst of everything.
Certainly. You have been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing your wisdom. Certainly would love to have you back again. Keep writing those books. Definitely. We need those.
I
And
will.
enjoy the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, James.
Before we go, we'd like to take time out and say thanks to our podcast community recording here in Harlem, who worked to bring you this episode. Thanks to producers Leonard DePlunk, Paula Farmer, and Jack Hamill, Jack and Leonard on the soundboard and camera, our tech heads, Vanessa McKnight and Cheney McKnight, Stephen Williams, who is mostly in the shadows these days, David Aaron of Short Memory Records for allowing us to use of that sweet jazz number Soy Sauce. And a very special Harlem thank you to Linda Gonzalez. Thanks for being with us, Linda. You have been listening to Hats Off with Dr. James McKnight. Be well. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. Please consult with a healthcare professional regarding any health conditions or concerns. Help is available. Speak with someone today. Dial 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Languages are in English and Spanish. Hours are 24/7. If you need help, please speak with someone today.